afternoon, everyone, and I'm really happy to welcome you today to join us for a virtual event from East Meets West Talk Series, Service Learning, Engage, Learn, and Act. And East Meets West Talk Series is a virtual event series launched by the Beijing Center to promote cross-cultural communication and exchange. And my name is Veronica Kotova. I'm a project assistant at the Beijing Center, and I will facilitate today's event. And my colleague Lukitsa, she will help me to facilitate the event today. So service learning is an educational method in which students perform meaningful service to meet community identified needs while reflecting on their actions in a way that allows them to better understand course concepts, the role their discipline plays in society, and their identity. And today our discussion will focus on the implementation of service learning ways to actively support local communities with a conscious effort towards cultural understanding. Today, our speakers will pay special attention to virtual service learning immersion programs that serve as a response to the new realities and challenges in modern education. And now I would like to introduce the event structure to you. We have today 3 invited speakers to join us, and the event will start with a presentation of Mr. Patrick Furlong, the Interim Director of the Center for Service and Action at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. Following with his presentation, Ms. Agnes Sagaral, a service learning coordinator from Ateneo, the Davao University in Philippines, will share more about their experiences with virtual immersion programs. And the event will conclude with a sharing by Father Johnny Rakotoarisoa from 5 Loaves and 2 Fish, Migrant Children Educational Center in Beijing. So today, our speakers, as I already mentioned, will be on the way from the US, basically West Coast to Philippines, and also one speaker from Beijing. And at the end of the event, we'll have a Q&A session. All audience is encouraged to ask questions, and you can do it during speaker's presentation by writing your questions in the chat box or at the end of the event during the Q&A session. So as we start from Mr. Patrick Furlong, could you please share your screen and introduce us this presentation? Thank you.
Of course. All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are at. It is really, really exciting to be here with you all today. So the theme of this talk is East Meets West. It's early over here in Los Angeles. I wanted to share a bit of my culture from my hometown of Los Angeles in parts of this presentation. So the art here is by Jose Ramirez. He's a local Los Angeles-based artist and one whose work really speaks to me as a practitioner of service learning and social justice. So this was a piece of art he made this year of his interpretation of life on Zoom during a pandemic, something I think all of us sitting in this webinar are familiar with right now. So I am, like Veronica said, the interim director of the Center for Service and Action. Our mission is really to see ourselves as a student hub for service, justice, and advocacy work at Loyola Marymount. And I think Loyola Marymount's a really unique place to do that work. You know, we're inspired by both our Marymount and Jesuit traditions, and we're emboldened to really educate students both in, but also outside the classroom to figure out how do they connect their passions and skills to that intersection point of world needs to really make the world a better place. I'm also a doctoral student, and I'm obsessed with the pedagogy and spiritual practices of the Jesuits. So that's something we could talk about at another time, but something that kind of plays into the work that we did here on virtual immersions. And I also think it's important to note that I'm a late arrival to the idea of global citizenship, but I arrived here as a result of my own experience as an undergraduate student years ago at Loyola Marymount. I grew up in a family that is the very opposite of global minded, but LMU, and specifically something we call the Alternative Breaks program, took me out of the United States for the first time when I was a sophomore in college. And today I've now traveled to over 50 countries because of my work in global immersion learning. So we know that these trips can really be transformational, but we also then had to figure out how do we make something like this transformational in the virtual world. And as I dive in, I just want to give a special shout out to the Beijing Center. You know, I got to first travel to the center in 2019, and I was just in awe of their work. You know, Veronica led a group of our students through this really beautiful and incredible immersion that I think pushed them and challenged them and got them to a deeper space of reflection of how East meets West. And so, you know, this pandemic has kept us apart in 2020, but I'm most certainly eager to resume our work together in person. But in the meantime, really appreciate the opportunity to be virtually here with Agnes and Father Johnny and Veronica. So special thanks to the Beijing Center as we dive in. So global citizenship and why it matters. I love these two quotes. For me, Jesuit education is about more than training somebody for their vocation. It's diversity, of course, offerings and co-curricular engagements that are really meant to educate people for justice and for citizenship in a community where their degree affords them a certain level of privilege and responsibility that we then beckon them to say, no matter who you are, whether you are an accountant, whether you want to go work for a nonprofit, whether you want to go into the legal world, find a way to utilize this education you've had in and out of the classroom to really try and make the world a more just and meaningful place for all people. And at the same time, we know this runs up against the challenges we're all aware of right now in the world, of kind of an ever-growing, shallow, self-absorbed perception of reality that Father Adolfo Nicolas spoke about when he addressed a conference of Jesuit higher ed leaders back in 2010. And so when I look at these two quotes, they create the framework of why these types of exchanges are important, and why even when the pandemic came, I think a lot of us were like, this cannot stop these interactions, even if we have to go about them differently. So at the end of the day, whether it is virtual or in person, I think when we're doing cultural exchanges, it comes down to this question. There's a Jesuit priest in Los Angeles at a low-income church in East LA, and he told a group of our LMU graduates one day that every morning when he wakes up, he tries to really kind of start his day with a reflection where he says, City of Los Angeles, his neighborhood Boyle Heights, and every person he encounters that day, can he encounter them with the curiosity of what is it like to be you, and to really want to know the answer to that question. And he said doing that orients him towards a more inclusive attitude and allows curiosity to be the driver of the way he interacts with people, rather than have judgment be that driver. And at the end of the day, I think it's saying that we're really trying to form people to be curious and empathetic. That's the entire idea of these exchanges, no matter what we say are the higher level goals. And we know immersion learning does that. We know that done right, students encounter kind of both the gritty reality of the world, as Father Kolvenbach would say, but they also encounter the beauty of the world in a different place. And they see things in a different way and say, okay, empathy is now requiring me to accept that the world is a complicated place and everyone's lives are going on. And so how do I engage in a global world that way? And so again, it beckons that question. What do we do when travel becomes impossible? I think back to when the pandemic first started and the Beijing Center asked us to kind of record these short videos of just messages of love and support to our colleagues who at that time in China were the ones really kind of facing the brunt of this virus. And I think that video should probably live on in fame somewhere, because a lot of folks just thought, man, this is really difficult what's happening in China. We're thinking about them, never imagining that it was going to take over the entire world. And so all of us were faced with this moment of how do we pivot? And so one thing we came up with at LMU, and I know we're not alone in this, we're going to have a good discussion with it, is virtual immersions. What we realized in our conversations with our students, where students were craving what any of us who have gone through an intensive lockdown this year at any point all understand. People were craving authentic encounters. They were showing up to class, maybe a lot of times in class, they weren't having that opportunity to converse and dive deep and connect with one another as human beings. And so when we began to talk to them about, hey, what would you think about a virtual immersion trip? They were saying, yes, yes, yes. Like, I so miss the authenticity and the opportunity to learn about these things that I would normally learn about. And so what we did as a university is we reached out to a few trusted partners, and we really approached them and said, listen, admittedly, this might be a crazy idea, but what if we take these experiences of in-person immersions that are so transformative and we try and bring them online? And, it felt really risky. I think the way we talked about it at the time was universities were slashing their budgets left and right. And at the same time, we were thinking about partners, particularly kind of in more low income settings, of their principal driver of revenue is also gone. And so we want to be good partners to them and make sure that we're supporting the work they do, because we know the importance of it. And so we said this could go great, or it could be totally a flop. It could be something really not great. And yet we have to try. and we have to go for it. And we had a couple partners who said, we agree, let's figure this out and let's do something. And so we did it. And this is a screenshot here on one night where, with one of our partners in El Salvador, they did this really cool thing at the end of our trip where they brought the students online and they had given us kind of a shopping list in advance, and we all made pupusas, a really kind of famous regional dish from El Salvador. And we went through this time cooking. Some did better than others. I wish I could show you the end products of everyone's plates. But people just sat there and they conversed and they exchanged and they hung out in ways that I think we are really struggling as a society to figure out in this virtual world. And so these immersion trips were 5-day experiences. What we would do is we'd have 3 to 5 pre-trip meetings over Zoom in advance. And those were both to get people bonded, but also to kind of educate them about the social justice issues they were going to face. And then we had 1 or 2 post-trip events. So we had a couple meetings post-trip, but we also really pushed the students and said, now that you have this information from a community partner in another country, how can you bring this back to the Loyola Marymount community? On the actual immersions, the structure worked really well, where we had 2 to 3 sessions a day. Each session was at most 1.5 hours. I think we all have learned on Zoom, there's really no reason to ever be on it more than an hour and a half. And even at an hour and a half, you start to kind of lose your focus. And then what we did was we did a mix of things. So we had a mix of meetings via Zoom. We watched a documentary together. Like I said, we had that cooking class together. And a couple of our partners made really low cost, but effective and personalized videos around issues too, that students then felt like, oh, wow, like I'm seeing something really unique that was produced for this experience. The other thing is, for most of us, we have reflections at the end of each day. We want people to kind of take the head and the heart and process what the eyes have been seeing. And in person, those are transformative. And we were curious how they'd go in this virtual world. And again, they were huge. Students were so thankful to be able to be on the trip. We had one international student who said, this is the first time I've spoken to anyone outside of my family in 8 months. And I'm not the type of person that's going to hop on the phone or Zoom with my friends. And so it's really refreshing to be with people and to just talk. And so it was a great experience. We also learned some important things. In the United States, there was so much going on that we would normally process in person at that time. So our first virtual immersion gathering happened in January. And we were meeting with some leaders in El Salvador who talked about the breakdown of their civil structure, their civil society, when the storming of our US Capitol happened on January 6th. And so for those of us who identify as US citizens, that was a really profoundly confusing and difficult day, and one that I was thankful as a practitioner and as an educator that I got to be with my students like we normally would in person, where I got to say, hey, let's hang on the line, let's check in, how are you doing? So, like I said, students were craving connection with one another, but they were also craving opportunities to talk about issues that they found important. Virtual alternative breaks, also it's really important to say, created increased access for us. And what I mean by that is this, students who perhaps lacked the travel documentation, either they're undocumented living in the United States, or they have parents who would never ever allow them to get a passport, for example, could suddenly participate in an international experience in a way they never could when they were online, or when they were in person, I mean. The other thing was cost was not an issue. For us, when we do a typical 1-week immersion, that ranges to be about $1,200 US. And our office subsidizes it heavily. That is a very discounted way to go and travel and have everything taken care of. But for a lot of our students, that's still a really difficult price, obviously. And virtual immersions cost $30. And even with that, we had support from different academic deans who said, if there is a student who cannot pay this, we believe in this, and we will help make sure that no one is turned away from these experiences because of cost. The other thing that happened was students were able to keep their other commitments, like work and family obligations, and still attend. So some of our students culturally, depending where they're from, the idea of being away from their family on break has never been something that would have been acceptable for their family. Their families wanted them at home during breaks from the university. And suddenly they could participate in this but still be at home. Or maybe there were students who really needed to keep a job and they weren't able to get time away from that job. And now they have the chance to do this. The other thing we really learned that was important was simultaneous interpretation technology on Zoom. So Zoom has the ability to have an interpreter speak, and you can have channels. So you could be on channel 1 if you want English, and channel 2 if you want Mandarin. And that was hugely important for the connection. We had one trip where we didn't do simultaneous interpretation, and we did like, someone speaks in Spanish and then we wait and there's an English translation, and it just kind of limited the opportunity for it to be more seamless for folks. And so that was important. And then again, we realized that not everything has to be on Zoom. In the United States, we've all become Zoom happy over the pandemic. And it's like people will reach out to you and say, hey, do you have 10 minutes to get on Zoom? And I'm like, before the pandemic, we just get on the phone. Like, why don't we get on a phone? We don't need to be on screens in front of each other. And so we really worked to also realize that there was going to be a burnout and an exhaustion with Zoom, or Zoom fatigue, as we call it. And so we tried to find ways to make it a little bit more fun, like I said, with those personalized videos, with cooking classes. But we also did things like students did one-on-one phone calls and walks for their reflections. As I'm wrapping up here, I'll say we plan to actually offer a mix of in-person and virtual immersion trips if we're able to in 2021 and 2022 with some potential modifications. I think we all obviously hope for a return to more in-person stuff, but I have certainly learned that no one really wins when they try and predict the course of COVID-19. And yet the important piece of it is, even if things go well and we're able to return to in-person, we've learned these virtual immersions are here to stay in some format or another. We also realize that some of the very challenges we all grapple with as we return to these workspaces are those that we have to experiment and grapple with here in virtual immersion. How do we find those ways to bring people together authentically? How do we create connection over that awkward moment of logging into a space together? And then we're going to try and figure that out of like, how do we maybe make the experience hybrid? Do we have an opportunity where students have pre-trip meetings in person and smaller, large gatherings of students can gather in one space while the virtual component is with the partners? And so we're trying to find ways to kind of play with it. And as I wrap, I just want to share this quote. It's a refugee living in the UK, Worcestershire. And it's meant a lot to me since I first heard it right in the aftermath of the United States presidential elections in 2016. I think we need to be brave enough to dive into the complexity of contradiction in our society. I think technology is both the driving force behind the growing superficiality in our world, and yet it's that very technology that allowed us to have transformative cultural experiences to still create global citizenship on both sides of these conversations when that would have been otherwise impossible. And so it's just a really beautiful thing for us to reflect on of how do we kind of bring folks together to bridge indifference, whether it's in person or virtual, to say community matters and we're going to show up for it. So really looking forward to hear what the other panelists say and then joining in some Q&A.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick, for your sharing. Actually, in 2019, I met so many students from LMU, and I remember how important sharing was for them and reflection, and they definitely had the sense of the community. And I'm really glad that those students that been students in 2020 and 2021 still get this experience, because it's really, really important part of their college experience in general. So yeah, I hope we can talk more about this during our Q&A. And Ms. Sagaral, could you please share your screen and continue our discussion and share share more about your service learning programs at Ateneo de Davao University.
Warm greetings to everyone. I would like to thank the Beijing Center for inviting me to be part of this East Meets West series. What I will share you this evening or this afternoon, wherever you are right now, is actually our own experience of the institutionalization of service learning. But before I will do that, please allow me to give you a context of how we operationalize the term service learning. In the Ateneo de Davao University, service learning is considered as a pedagogy. Such it is considered as a teaching or learning methodology that allows our students to apply their classroom learnings in addressing community or institutional partner needs. So in service learning, we always give equal importance to both learning goal and the service goal with reflection at the heart of it. Service learning is also considered as a social formation program. It is part of an overall social formation program that is integrated in the curriculum as the general education mission courses of the university. The social formation framework of the Arrupe Office of Social Formation, that's service where service learning is being launched, takes us this spiraling approach where the students go deeper in their social formation process as they progress in their academic curriculum and develop them to be professionals who will promote social justice for the common good as their expression of being Ateneo, the Davao University sui generis leaders. Service learning also is framed in the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, the concept of which, of course, is derived from the underlying principles and values of the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius, who is the founder of the Jesuits. It has actually 5 elements. So there's context, experience, reflection, action, and evaluation. I hope that with this framework that we see right now, this would not be misconstrued as linear, that is, they happened one after the other, but actually, one or more of the elements may occur at the same time in the overall learning process. In service learning, we consider the context of the learners to understand their student life. That is really very important, especially right now that we're doing things online. So we have to know if they have stable connectivity, if they even have gadgets for virtual immersion or for online learning. And so after that, we also provide them with an orientation about what service learning is to prepare them for their actual area visit. But this time it's virtual immersion. And then they are exposed to learning experiences like having initial contact with the partners. Usually our partners do come from the urban poor. They are those in the margins. We have partners from in rural areas who are indigenous peoples and so many others. So in this, I hope that you are able to see the photos here. These are the photos of our students having their grand time doing the initial contact with our community partners. And then they also do some contract setting because they do need to set the parameters. Like it's important, especially at this point where we do things virtually. So it has the students need to get the commitment of, I mean, we need to get the commitment of the partners that they do would have to spend enough time whenever the students need to ask them and vice versa. Okay. And so as you can see here, this is also a picture, a photo where the students did their needs assessment with it's a school in what we call as Gawad communities, and this is one of the barangays in Davao City. And then here we are having community partner orientation. Okay. So with these students are exposed to learning experiences. No? Like I've said already, the initial contact with a partner, need assessment, and consultations. Then the students gather for reflection, as what Patrick has also shared a little while ago. We do gather them for reflection as a way to make sense of their community engagement experience and find the meaning in the context of the partner's needs, what are the partner's needs, and match that with their own professional competencies. It helps them to think ways also of how they will proceed with the remaining visits and plan for the project, their project. So these are one of the reflection and processing sessions that we have. And so as students are able to find meaning in their experiences of encounter with the partners, they are led to action by designing and implementing needs-based and expertise-based projects. So here is an example of a project that is design of just a simple irrigation system for a vegetable garden. And our partner is actually a home for street kids, and they need to be able to sustain their food, so there would be food sustenance uh, during the pandemic. So they have to grow vegetables, and our engineering students help them design a simple irrigation system to water their vegetable garden. Okay, and then I have here also several other pictures of our students doing their own projects. Okay, here a group of electrical engineering students, they training some out of school youth in a barangay. It has something to do with electrical wiring, and it is hoped that from this they would be able also to, make a means of living for them. Okay. So monitoring and the project turnover precedes the final processing and reflection. So the whole service learning process ends with the program evaluation of the students and the academic and community partners. At the end of an academic year, we always hold this ceremony, a closing ceremony, which we call as pabuos, to celebrate the fruits of the service learning journey of our students. And in this culminating activity, we give recognition to our various partners as well as our students who did very well in their projects. Service learning was first introduced to the university under the banner of Pedro Arrupe Service Learning Program in 2006. The program has three components, namely the Maligdong Project, which aimed to integrate the values of integrity and peace in the curriculum, the IHEM, which centered on anti-corruption advocacy, and the third one was the Pagtataya, which was implemented through a theology course. And then after that, we shifted gear, still in the same course, but this time in a different topic, because this time, students learn about social teachings anchored in the scriptures and the General Congregation 32 document of the Society of Jesus and that of the Jesuit Mission. And this became their inspiration to engage with the community and institutional partners to endeavor and implement discipline-based projects. In 2015, there were already several faculty members from different programs who showed interest in integrating service learning in the different courses that they taught. This interest was actually fueled by a policy of the implementation of service learning in all academic projects in the university. And so this time you would see that there is some sort of surge in the courses which have been which integrated service learning. There's also been a surge in projects, and so with community partners. And then come 2015, there were already faculty members from different programs who were involved in service learning. This was given a big push because of the strong mandate from the office of our academic vice president that all programs would have at least one professional course wherein service learning will be integrated. What was also very notable in this time was that administrative support was given with the hiring of additional staff of the service learning program at the Arrupe Office of Social Formation. And then there was also a surge in faculty members who became service learning champions. However, the implementation in 2018 by the K-12 transition gravely affected the implementation of service learning since we did have few students, and therefore there were few programs who implemented service learning. But what was so promising during this time was that the service learning program the staff was able to spearhead the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities in Asia and the Pacific, or AJCU Service Learning Program, with the theme Reconciling Within Humanity, Peace Building Stories of the Peoples of Mindanao. There were 32 students and faculty participants coming from different Jesuit universities from Japan, Indonesia, South Korea, Thailand, East Timor, and the Philippines. But when the COVID pandemic came, it caused drastic changes in the educational landscape of the university. The in-person classes have been replaced by remote and online learning. In effect, service learning had to adapt and innovate in order to continue the formative goal of the program. And so what was developed was electronic service learning. We took this from the model of Waldner, Gorey, and Widener. And in our case, we are now using the extreme electronic service learning. That is, we do things fully online, both the classroom instruction and that of engagement. So we call it virtual engagement. After 5 years of institutionalization process of the service learning, we wondered how have we gone with how far have we gone with the program. We asked ourselves, are we still on the right track? And so with this in mind and the desire to really gauge how far have we gone with our institutionalization process, we participated in a study about the institutionalization and impact assessment of service learning in Jesuit institutions in the Philippines. This study is funded by the Commission on Higher Education, and I would just be sharing to you some of the results of the study, and one of which is the self-assessment tool that we made use. This tool was developed by Furco, and this tool would introduce 5 dimensions that needed to be gauged, and that in each dimension there are 3 stages. And so you have to check which stage are you in right now. So that's how it goes. And so allow me to present some of the data here. So in dimension 1, which is philosophy and mission of service learning, as far as Ateneo de Davao is concerned, when it comes to definition of service learning, we are still in stage 2, quality building. What does that mean? That despite the fact that we have already an operational definition of the term service learning, there is some sort of variance of its use. What is really very glaring is that at times our partners in the community would often confuse us with another social formation program. Okay, but when it comes to strategic planning and with alignment of service learning with our institutional mission, we are right now at sustained institutionalization. This is stage 3. Why? Because the advancement of service learning is articulated in our strategic plan, One Ateneo One Plan, and clearly service learning is aligned with our institutional mission. Okay, and then for dimension 2, which is about faculty support for and involvement in service learning. So I have 3 items here. Faculty awareness. We are still in quality building. Why? Because although there is already an adequate number of faculty who knows what service learning is, but still there are others who are still grappling of what it is. And then about faculty involvement and support, still it's quality building. Because although there is an adequate number of faculty are so supportive of the program, but there are few advocates. And for faculty leadership, we are still in quality building stage for the reason that there are one or two only influential faculty members who provide leadership to the service learning effort in the campus. Okay. So for dimension 3, we have student support for and involvement in service learning. So as you can see, for the two items, student awareness and student opportunities, we are still in the quality building stage. Why again? Because there are still, for student awareness, there are mechanisms for information, but they are sporadic and they are concentrated rather in few departments. For student opportunities, it is because options for our students are still limited. For student leadership, we are still in the first stage, critical mass building. This is because there are few opportunities for students to take leadership roles in advancing service learning. Okay. Now, this is the fourth dimension, community participation and partnerships. For community awareness, we are still in the critical mass building. As I have said earlier, this is something to do with the way how people consider service learning. Always we are confused with another program, social formation program, which is the National Service Training Program, who's also doing community projects. And then for mutual understanding and community agency leadership and voice, we are in the sustained institutionalization stage. Why so? Because for mutual understanding, the university and the community partner representatives are very much aware and are very sensitive with each other's needs, resources rather, and the capacity for developing and implementing service learning activities. For leadership voice, it is said that again, we are in stage 3 because we provide spaces for our partners to be heard and to also consider them very well in the design and the implementation of our projects. In fact, annually we hold a partner summit wherein our partners are heard by allowing them to share to us their barangay development plan, their local community plans. And then the last dimension is the institutional support for service learning. So I have 3 items here: coordinating entity. We are already in the sustained institutionalization stage because there is an office who is devoted to the implementation and the advancement of service learning. For funding, it's also sustained institutionalization because our activities are supported by hard funding from the university. And lastly, administrative support, which is also stage 3, because administrative leaders do understand and support very well service learning, and they actively cooperate to make service learning visible in the campus. Okay. Now, another milestone in our service learning story is the conduct of the International Service Learning Program. This is an electronic service learning program. This endeavor is a partnership of the Ateneo Internationalization for Mindanao Office and the Arrupe Office of Social Formation. So far, we have already rolled out 2 cycles of the International Electronic Service Learning. And both cycles focus on the theme on peace building in Mindanao. And so, also, what is being provided in this IESLP are formative sessions as well as remote service immersions. In particular, with an Islamic school in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, which is the Dar al-Ulum Wakigma. And so at this point, allow me to end my talk by showing to you this very short video of how we conducted the IESLP. Once again, daghang salamat. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sagaral, on your sharing. It's a very impressive work on the institutionalization of the service learning, and hope we can discuss more things later in the Q&A. I apologize, we're running a little bit late, so if any of the speakers cannot stay longer, please text me in a private message if they have any other schedule arrangements later. And Father Johnny, could you please start your sharing about your work at Five Loaves to Fish? Actually, as Father Johnny is in Beijing now already for quite a while, as far as I understand, most of his work continues to be offline because of China's efforts to contain the pandemic. And it will be very interesting to hear more, especially about the last year where the center was closed and when you have also some challenges during that year. So yeah, please share with us. And let me know if you want me to share some photos from the center when it's needed.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, this is Father Juni, Oblate of Mary Immaculate, missionary here in Beijing. I have been here for 4 years. First of all, I would like to give thanks to TBC to give me this opportunity to share and to talk about our ministry to migrant children here in Beijing. And for the past years, we are very grateful the fact that we had a volunteer from TBC, and this year we had a volunteer from TBC. So thank you very much for your support and your help to our little center. My sharing will be focused on our overnight ministry to migrant children in Beijing at Five Loaves and Two Fish. Chinese eternal migration has been the biggest movement of people anywhere on earth in the last 100 years. It is estimated that China has over 250 million official internal migrants. So as part of our ministry here in Beijing, we take care of migrant children in the center called Five Loaves and Two Fish, a place where people could come and feel at home first of all, while providing a space for children to study and interact among themselves. I would like to give you a short background of the center. It was in 2012 that we found Guchong, a little village located in the remote area of Beijing. There are many migrant workers coming from the provinces who were living there. They live in small rooms, usually father, mother, and one or two children. Men work in the construction, while mothers make some little business, like selling fruits and vegetables on the street. And some of them are working as a domestic helper. Knowing the situation of families living in a poor condition, we decided to rent a traditional house in the middle of the village to foster education for the migrant children, as they had no opportunity to improve their education. Small rooms with no much space, parents unable to help them with their homework because parents leave home early in the morning and they come back late in the evening. And you know, the kids left alone at home after school. So we offered the place where children, after finishing their school in the afternoon, they came to study and to do homework. And we have a Chinese teacher and some volunteer came to help them for their study and for their homework. And that was the beginning of our presence in the center. Our main activities at 5 Loaves and 2 Fish, we focus on providing our children a space to study and to do their homework, as well providing them with the best education possible. And the activities we have like English class, games, crafting, design, music, dance, painting, sports, and intercultural exchange, and so on. We did have mainly elementary students, about 40 formally registered. And we open the place every day afternoon from Monday to Friday and Saturday morning. And during the weekdays, children are invited to do their homework with the help of a Chinese teacher and volunteer. And the little snack like drink or coke, cookies is prepared by the mother or some volunteer. We are having cultural activities with the help of local volunteers or foreigners and from international schools. And since 3 years now, we have got in touch with several international schools, and we do have some young Chinese students coming there with some recreational activities. They do come to realize and appreciate what they have, family support and good education, and they are willing to serve with a sense of gratitude. Through the international school, we are getting more support, like parents coming and visiting with some donations, being clothes or toys or material for school. And at times sponsoring some of our program, like Christmas party, winter and summer activities. And through our center, they are also introduced to other groups and charitable organizations that are dealing with other forms of poverty and needs. The children who are attending our after-school program are also invited to be themselves volunteers, providing some service when needed by charitable organization, so-called roundabout. The idea is to be not only recipient of attention and love, but also to give and share what they can do according to his or her own situation. And it is the spirit of sharing the little we have, what we do see expressed in the episode of the 5 Loaves and 2 Fish. Working with the migrant workers and the migrant children, they are facing some challenges. And one of them is due to the education system. The children, after finishing their elementary school, they have to go back to their hometown. So they have to leave their parents, and they go to their hometown. And they are going to stay sometimes with grandparents or relatives, and even some friends. So it is one of the big issues, because you can imagine the children, they have been here in Beijing for a long time. Some of them were born here, but after finishing their elementary school, they have to go back to their hometown. So this is one of the issues. Also, for the last past years, the condition of living of families have been improving. They had a stable job, and their place were in a better condition compared to what they have before. But due to the situation of coronavirus, good number of them went back home, and now they are unable to come back. So they have to stay in their hometown and to start a new beginning, a new life. And also because of the situation of COVID, it is not easy to carry on the program, the activity in the center, because in Beijing, many foreigners have left. There are few, so we don't have enough foreigners who come to help us to organize activity. So this is one of the issue and challenge due to the situation of COVID. For conclusion, our goal, we try first of all to be a presence starting for the very human level of establishing relationship with the local people. We try to pass on Christian values while validating the many positive aspects that Chinese people have already in their culture. At the moment, we are putting the physical space, use of the house, some financial and human resources. Our belief is that people have to contribute in the way they can, 5 loaves and 2 fish, and in the years to come, to let the locals be more involved. So that is the end of my sharing. So thank you very much for listening to me. Veronica, could you please play the short video for us?
Thank you very much, Father Johnny, for sharing about activities at Five Loaves to Fish. I think now we can proceed to the Q&A session, and everyone is encouraged to throw more questions to the chat or the Q&A box, and also speakers are encouraged to ask questions to each other. So I think I will begin with some questions. Um, oh, I think Patrick already replied to one in the question box. But maybe we can just discuss this more, and it's Agnes Sagaral could also maybe add something. The question is there any plan in your institution for a comparative study of the outcome of online and offline service learning? And what areas would you suggest to look into? So please, Patrick, maybe you could share more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I love that question. So I'd be really curious to hear what Agnes says to it as well from Ateneo's point of view. But definitely, I mean, I think for me, I think some people approached virtual as like it was just a bridge, like, oh, we had to do this and we can't wait to get back in person. And there's elements of that that are true, right? I think all of us crave more in-person engagement, but I think there's been particular learnings. And I think what I see is like specialized fields have a chance to really kind of continue virtually. So we might say a team of marketing students can work with a nonprofit in, say, a rural part of the United States or somewhere else, for example, and do that. A team of engineers might be able to use their skill set for more of a project-based approach. So when you look at service learning outside of immersion, I think virtual has some real opportunities. We don't have anything yet planned to kind of study the back and forth. I think truthfully, a lot of folks only maybe in the last couple months have began to say, oh wait, there might be elements of this virtual stuff that are here to stay and weren't just, oh, we got to do this because we got to do this. So that's my personal opinion, but I was just having this conversation with a colleague in the business school, a faculty member, where she was saying just that of like, we really should kind of create two different opportunities and measure those outcomes and what learnings there are there.
Yeah. Veronica, if I may add to what Patrick did.
Yeah, please.
Say, I would really quite agree with him. In fact, in the beginning, it was really a struggle on our part because, you know, the pandemic came and we were not prepared for it, and we were asked by the school to really stop everything because of COVID. But then we cannot just leave our community partners, and we know that they need us. And so we really did some sort of research. We did review of literature and find out how virtual engagement can really work for us. Although there were struggles in the beginning, like, you know, the Philippines is sort of third world when it comes to internet connection. It's really hard for our community partners to engage with us virtually. First, the net connection is unstable. Second, they needed to be capacitated in the use of different online platforms. And there was even one incident of a breaking of a, you know, security health protocol, I should say, because the student was so excited really in the engagement process that she forgot that there's this health protocol that, you know, they need to really observe. But nevertheless, in the beginning, there was also a very strong discussion about, is it really authentic? Is it really the real encounter? So we, for several times in the inside our, you know, inside our office, we did have a sort of discussion on this, but of course our hands were tied, and so we have to do something. And so we tried out for four programs in the beginning. We did it with 4 programs, and well, it was not so bad actually. We were able to come up with, you know, projects that really benefited our partners. Like in one instance, we did partner with a institution that promotes, you know, carbon reforestation. And so what the students did was that they helped this institution by coming up with, you know, fund in their fundraising, and it worked. But when it comes to doing a study about this, I guess I don't know if it's really, you know, it's too early to say. So early to say, but maybe this could be considered after a year or so, because, you know, things are still changing and we are still finding our way and we are learning so much. But I'm not saying that it does not work. it does. Although there are compromises. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's great. I will continue with some questions from the chat, and yeah, you also please feel free to throw more questions to the Q&A box so speakers can also see the questions. What aspects of virtual immersion meetings will you incorporate into in-person immersion going forward? And also adding from myself, do you think that virtual immersion will stay when, let's say, the pandemic is over and our offline opportunities are back to normal? Do you think this can be implemented? And I think it can be also both for Patrick and Agnes, and Father Jordan, if he also wants to jump in with some comments.
Veronica, if I may go first.
Yeah, please.
I would say that I would say that it's here to stay, because there's a lot of opportunities when you also do virtual engagement. Like, you're able to reach out to other communities far from your own community. As of the moment, we are considering to partner with non-government organizations outside of our city. In one instance, we're hoping to be in connection with another NGO in Bukidnon, let's say in Bukidnon. And so I guess it's here to stay. We would not, although as I have said, there are limitations, but there are also opportunities.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I mean, again, I think from our experience, it created more accessibility for different students for participating in these trips than we ever had before. And that's something really important to us, is how are we serving all of our students, not those who have the financial means to participate in these types of experiences. And the other thing I would use as an example is, one of the partners we worked with is a partner that's been a longstanding university partner in El Salvador. But for us at our university in the United States, our risk management procedures have in recent years prevented us from traveling to El Salvador. And El Salvador is really important for us, both from a historical perspective with the Jesuits, but also just being in Los Angeles, which has a large Salvadoran expatriate community. We have a number of students who are Salvadoran. And so this gave us a chance to engage with a partner that we really respect and admire and have been wanting to continue to work with for years now. And now we have an avenue to do that. So I think both will exist. I think people are craving the opportunities to travel safely in person, whether it is 2 hours down the road on a highway or across the world, and we will be honoring that as soon as we can. But these virtual modalities are here. And so the question to me is less, do they exist or not, but how do we improve upon them to make them even more dynamic moving forward?
Okay, thank you. And I think this also question goes together with your sharing about the hybrid programs, because actually this can, I think, be definitely implemented in the future, and it can be used both for reflection, for preparation, and for staying in touch, because we here at the Beijing Center discussed this before, that would be great to stay in touch with the students that visited the Beijing Center and are the Beijing Center alumni, but are not coming to Beijing because they're in other countries. And following up with that, I have a question for myself. Are you considering any development of the cross-cultural service, cross-country service learning programs, let's say, even with the Beijing Center? I mean, we will be welcome to, you're welcome to work with us if you want on any programs or exchange, because actually now we do have students at the Beijing Center. So not only about us, but generally, do you consider that, and have you tried that? Because I think Ms. Sagaral showed in her video about the e-service learning programs that there were also connections from different countries. So what do you think about cross-country service learning programs?
Well, if you ask me, Veronica, I think there is a lot of opportunity in this, intercultural exchange. As our own experience of the International Electronic Service Learning. Just recently, we did have just concluded the second cycle, and we have students from Indonesia, from Thailand, uh, also from other parts of the Philippines, and the focus of the webinar sessions and the project that they were able to come up with was on peace building in Mindanao, and they were very successful in coming up with a peace education module for this one Islamic school in Cotabato City. And I guess there's really a big opportunity for this kind of thing, interreligious, intercultural, you know, service learning, electronic service learning.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting potentials moving forward. So I think we're lucky at LMU to be supported by a provost who's really innovative and global minded. So that's one thing that helps us is we knew, even when we created these virtual immersions, I was like, I think Provost Poon will be more supportive of us trying something and having it not go well than not trying something. And so I think kind of two thoughts that I don't know directly get to your question, Veronica, but they come to mind as you pose that question is one, I think there's some really interesting opportunities for virtual immersion that isn't just like students from LMU visiting the Beijing Center, but is it students from LMU and Ateneo and at the UCA in El Salvador finding ways to create connection together virtually and then joining together with a partner like the Beijing Center. That's something really exciting to me. And I think that's an area where it would take a little more work, but if you had faculty that were specifically focused in certain areas and were creating opportunities for them to work together more with students, that's exciting. And I also think like that's something I've always wanted, even when we return to in person. I used to work for a corporation that did immersions, and we had staff around the globe. So when I would lead these immersions, I would be at the airport at one point collecting our US travelers, then collecting our Chinese travelers at another one, collecting the folks from the Philippines, and so on and so on. And we'd have this really interesting international group. And I think there's some really unique opportunities there when we're engaging in person again of how are we finding ways to kind of get as diverse a group of students together to engage with a partner. So it's not just, oh, here's Los Angeles and Beijing, but here's Los Angeles, Beijing, and Manila and Amsterdam. Like, what a fascinating opportunity we have if we're willing to get into kind of the difficulty of planning it.
Yes, definitely. There are so many opportunities on that. And especially for those students who were not able to travel for various reasons, and now they can have this virtual immersion. Yeah, this is really great. Okay, there is one more question for Agnes and Patrick. Talking about reflection with students, how do you approach the reflection session portion of the meetings with the students? Do you find it difficult to engage students to openly share their thoughts and perspectives? And I guess this also question is more about virtual immersion because it's not the same with Zoom than in person. So yeah, please.
Yeah. Oh, go for it, Agnes, please.
Okay. What we usually do is that we prepare first the reflection questions, and then we ask the participants. This is an supposed asynchronous session, and then after we meet them in a synchronous session, and they do some sort of sharing. And what also really helped maybe was that other than having reflection sessions, the participants also did have there were sessions on solidarity, culture exchange, and so somehow that has actually broken the ice. And when we this funny this is quite funny, but also uh, because when we were about to conclude the IESLP, they decided to, keep in touch with each other. And they were quite sentimental about, saying their goodbyes and all, because they have been so attached already to each other. And I guess it's also the way questions are, if I may say, if the way questions are being asked. Uh, because we just do not focus on the self of how the experience really, impacted what interior movements came about during the experience. But we also ask questions like, how are they being invited, to respond to the realities that they have experienced. Um, and and even questions about relating about God, or you know okay. I guess that's it.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of things. I mean, one, there's even what just happened right there with Agnes and I, and that's something we've all gotten better on with Zoom, is like two people start talking at the same time. And I think in the early days, we'd have this like, oh, no, you go. And we've now learned certain cultural cues. Like one person quickly says, oh, no, you go, and then hits their mute button. And when you see the mute button is lit, it's, oh, okay, this person has the floor to proceed. So I think like we've all naturally learned different engagement things. I think I'd also address it from what is missing in terms of in person. So if we were in person, one thing that's super helpful, let's say Veronica was one of my student participants. I'm on this immersion with them. I'm watching how all my students are engaging or not engaging. And I have that chance to maybe notice, okay, Veronica seems a little disengaged or a little melancholy. The next time we get on the bus, I'm just going to happen to sit next to Veronica, and I'm going to be able to have a one-on-one conversation with her. And so we've lost that. And so I think one thing we have to do is, I had all the WhatsApps for my students and was able to kind of text them throughout the experience and just say, wow, that was really interesting. I'd love to connect with you and see what you thought about it. So as leaders, we have to go an extra step to make individual connections. And I think, what Agnes said is so true of like, we still just prep the same way we would in person. And we laid ground rules of like, some folks are going to come to this from their head, others are going to come from their heart, some are a mix of the two. And you just kind of hold that space. And if you've prepared well and you lay out like, here's what this will look like, I think people want guidance so bad. And when you say, here's how things will move, here's the cadence of it, let me name what will be awkward in advance so we can all laugh about it when it comes up, it creates an environment where people feel more comfortable. And then I think the other thing we don't do well in person, and we're even worse virtually, is sometimes we have to let silence marinate, or we have to let silence sit there. And I think a lot of times we all get really uncomfortable and are like, okay, does anyone have anything else? And it's like, nope, be quiet, stay on mute. I know as the like leader, you feel really kind of like, why is no one answering? Did I put a good question? But I think it's important. And the other thing is we had a student leader on our trip. And so we would really push our students and say, as much as you're willing to kind of be vulnerable, it's going to create a space for others to do the same. And when our students were willing to talk about the emotions they were experiencing, or our student leaders, it allowed our regular student participants to feel invited as well. So I think it's just doing a lot of what you did in person, but being cognizant of the virtual.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Virtual experience are way more intense because you see basically every person's face in close capture, because when there are many students together, it's different. And here everyone is expected to talk, and you always think, oh my God, like I'm on a big screen and everyone can make my screen big and see me really closely, even though it's so far by distance, but it's kind of far and close at the same time. Yeah, it definitely creates new etiquette rules. I have one question to Father Johnny. Father Johnny, did you have any virtual or online experiences at Five Loaves to Fish? For example, volunteers would have some classes through Zoom with the students or anything. Have you tried this when the center was closed during the pandemic? Sorry, we cannot hear you. Can you please unmute yourself first? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we had online activity with some of our volunteers last year during the lockdown, like English class or some crafting, even crafting we did on online because during the lockdown, as you know, you cannot do the activity face to face in the center. So we have to find a way how to carry on the activity. So during the lockdown, like 6 months, we had online activity with the kids. My impression was that the kids did like it very much, especially with the English class, because when it is face to face, some kids they are shy, they don't ask question or they don't even dare to respond some of the questions from the teachers. But what happened was during the online English class, they were very active, asking questions, and they were more paying attention to the teachers. So I could say that they did like it very much. And also during the online activity, the kids, they are more focused, you know, if it is face to face, maybe they were talking to each other, not focusing on the class or some crafting or whatever. But during the online, they were really very pay attention to what we did with them. So for my experience, I think we are very grateful to have this opportunity to use this online. You can imagine if this pandemic happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago, no internet, no Zoom, no WeChat, no WhatsApp. You can imagine what happened. So we have to be grateful because even we cannot gather together, we cannot see face to face each other, but the Zoom or online, we can do something like we did now. If there is no Zoom, we don't have opportunity to meet and to share about our work. So I think we have to be grateful for that. And I think after the pandemic, yeah, it will be still people will still using. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Johnny, for sharing about your experiences, because actually, even though now your center is open again, you did experience this half a year lockdown, which probably was very tough. And yeah, we really hope that we all can return to offline immersion trips at some point, but still having this new background of this virtual experiences that we all had during this already year and a half of pandemic. I think now we'll be concluding our event, but the speakers are welcome to stay longer to chat and maybe to discuss some other issues. And I would like to thank everyone for today's sharing. It's very important because currently we all have entered a challenging period of transformation in education, and especially in the international education. So it's critically important to share the ways we learn to adapt to those challenges and support each other in that matter. And keeping service learning programs going in such an environment is critically important because global pandemic hits those who need our support the most. Like Father Johnny mentioned, that in 5 Loaves, 2 Fish, those kids really are deprived from many opportunities because they have to come back to their cities from where they come from. They cannot have those experiences. And when lockdown happens, they are just staying home. And at the same time, the students are also deprived from the opportunity to share, reflect, and experience new things, which is a great deal of their college education. Because of that, I think it's great that we learn about the ways how to avoid these problems and how to find the ways to still keep the programs going. Again, many thanks to all the speakers for joining us today, especially for those who joined really late, really early in the morning, and for others, it's already late in the evening. So thank you very much for your flexibility and working in such difficult hours. And thank you to all attendees to joining us today and throwing such great questions. I hope you enjoyed this event.